Welcome to Barcelona. Can you guys hear me across the Atlantic Ocean? Can I get a thumbs up? That is so helpful. I cannot I cannot underscore how delighted I am to have you guys here, how excited I am that Zoom has these advanced features that are sending like hearts and thumbs up across the screen. This is amazing. Just before we hop into all of these pieces, can everyone just throw into the chat, where are you coming live from? Partly, I secretly want to know whether I have any other European friends hanging out over here, but where are you sitting joining us live for Impact Lives today? Let's throw that into the chat. This is awesome. And I'm going to get you guys to do one more thing before we jump in. If you are able to turn your camera on so that we can see all of you. I've got these amazing screens here so that it kind of feels like I'm talking to something other than a camera, and I cannot underscore enough the difference that it actually makes being in this soundproof Barcelona basement room to be able to see your faces. If you're able to do that, that would be amazing. And one more thing I want you guys to do before we jump in. I want you to go up to the three little dots up to the right of your view of the room. I want you to click on those three little dots. I want you to scroll down to where it says rename. And I want you to make sure that your first name is there. And then I want you to put your social media handle. So for me, it would be at Dr. Meghan Walker. I don't know what it is for you, but I want, as you are connecting with people over the course of the next 2 days, to know how to reach them in the other real world known as Instagram. Amazing. Now, just because like real life is going to happen while we are live on this piece, I also just want to let my team know I can hear random people doing their dishes in the background. So if we can just keep an eye on who needs to be muted as we go, that would be so helpful. If everyone wants to check that feature for themselves, we haven't shut you down because we want this event to be interactive. We want you to be able to ask questions. I got my little earpiece here so we can have a whole conversation. Just double check that feature as you are sitting at home. It's like we're in a big conference room together. It's like almost like we are together. Now, let me just share in this conversation about this notion of the intelligent practice and the advent of AI and what's going to happen. I actually just want to have a bit of a second. And it occurred to me as I was watching the opening video and as I was standing up here that there is no part of me that if you had told me a year ago that on October 16th or whatever date it is now, because all the days are a blur to me, that I would be standing in a studio in Barcelona broadcasting Impact Lives out to all of you, there is not an ounce of my being that would have believed you. Not an ounce of my being would have believed you because this was not on the radar for me a year ago. We were gearing up for a small trip to Europe. Some of you may know this. So my daughter Naya had the opportunity to play soccer here, and she was going to be playing for 4 weeks. And we knew one of us would probably have to come over with her. And we thought, well, if we're going for 4 weeks, we might as well stick around. And then that is kind of like renovating your bathroom, like where you're just going to change the wallpaper. And then suddenly now we're changing the fixtures. And then suddenly now we're like gutting the whole ground floor. And if we're going to gut the ground floor, we might as well take the whole house down. That's kind of how I'm standing here right now. But Naya was going to be here. She was going to be playing soccer, also known as football, over here in Europe. And as we got talking, we said, what if we had this once in a lifetime opportunity? What if we pulled the kids out of school? What if we got an Airbnb? What if we lived in Barcelona as a family and gave our kids the opportunity to experience Europe in a more immersive way? And that's all I thought we were going to do. And it was a lot of work to come over here for 3 months. We left the dog at home, we packed our bags, we came on over, we got our Airbnb, we were all settled in. And we were about 6 to 8 weeks into this adventure, and it was going beautifully. And we were walking down a boulevard one day, and my husband turned to me and he said, Megan, are you starting to get that itch to go home? You know when you've been on vacation, not for 7 days, it never happens with 7 days, but 10 days? 10 days of a good vacation, and at day 10, you're like, I'm ready to go home. He looked at me, he's like, are you getting that itch to go home? And I looked at him and I looked around and I looked at my kids and I burst into tears on this beautiful boulevard in downtown Barcelona. And he was like, oh gosh, what have I done? I said, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave here. I actually feel like what's happening right now is we are living in this state of congruence with all of our values. One of our core values being adventure and travel. One of the things I've been like trying to figure out for a really long period of time, and you guys tell me in the chat if you're trying to figure this out, balance. And I would say to my team every week on our meeting, I'd be like, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel 10 times more productive because I wake up 6 hours before you. Not because I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but because the time zone is working in my favor. I could get on a bike and in 10 minutes we could be down at the Mediterranean Sea. Now, this might not be the life that you wanted, and I didn't even know it was the life that I wanted. But suddenly I felt at peace and at home at a phase of my life that I knew was going to be a little bit busy and was going to be a little bit frenetic. And the reason I am standing here, oh, my hair is creating problems for all of you. The reason that I am standing here is not because of all of these moving pieces. It's not because we did all of this work to make it happen. There were logistics that had to happen. But the reason I am standing here in Barcelona, because we made the decision, do we really want to do this? Like, would we really move? Would we really leave the house that we share with my mother-in-law? And would we bring the dog and would we pull the kids out of school and like disrupt their childhood? We're like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And there was work to be done. But what really happened, the real reason that we're here is not because of all of that work. You guys can work hard. I can work hard. I've worked hard before. It's because we made the decision. We're going to talk about lots of things over the course of the next 2 days. If we're going to talk about the intersection of AI, and we're going to talk about what needs to be true in your practice, and we're going to talk about how to build your ideal life, I want you to know that the leadership skill, the thing you are going to need to have in place to make that happen more than anything else, is the capacity to be decisive with respect to your life. This is not a skill that you are born with. This is a skill that you practice. And being decisive isn't the hard part. Picking the yellow pillow or the blue wallpaper, that's not the hard part. It's taking complete ownership and accountability of the consequences of that choice. And let me tell you, when we were talking about disrupting our kids' lives, and literally that's the word they used, you're choosing to disrupt our life. When we made those decisions, it was being accountable for the consequences that was actually the hardest part. And we're going to step into and we're going to break these pieces down over the course of the next 2 days. Because I don't know about you, but kind of what I'm hoping we get out of this is not just a strategy you can put in place on Monday morning, which I guarantee we will have for you, and not just speakers who are going to inspire you, which I guarantee we're going to have for you. But I want you to feel empowered to be able to choose and create your ideal life starting on Monday morning. How many people want that more than anything else? How many people feel like you are creating your ideal life right now? You are making the kinds of choices in your life that reflect your values, that reflect where you want to go. I just want you to write the word create. I want you to commit to that if that's the energy you want to be able to pull from the next 2 days. This is awesome, because that's where we're going to go. Now, as we step into this, to do that, to talk about AI and to talk about practice, we're going to have to talk about the leadership skills. And I've alluded to those already. We also have to understand the landscape in which we are working and we are operating. And that's where we're going to open this. I will be very transparent. This is like the longest dig in we're going to have to do over the course of Impact Lives. I was reviewing our run of show last night and I was like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? But this like sets the stage. You need to stand up, stand up. But let's really tackle, let's really understand where we are right now in this moment so we can build something from here moving forward. So we can understand and acknowledge our circumstances, but not become victims to it. And it's sort of appropriate that we're kicking off this conversation from Barcelona because that is the energy of this city. And if I could get my team here to pull up our slides, because I want you guys to see this. How many of you have been to Barcelona? Just drop the word Barcelona in the chat if you've been here before. This is awesome. So one of the things about this city, and one of the things that really struck me, it is a deeply historic, old city. Barcelona was founded in approximately 15 BC. Its proximity to the Mediterranean Sea, and by proximity I mean on the Mediterranean Sea, meant that it became a really important shipping port. The city is built like a series of rainbows, and right down by the water, you see the oldest part of the city. And that old part of the city literally feels medieval. It literally feels like you are moving through these tight little corners. And then built outside of that component is an area of the city called Eixample, and that's what you see here. It also houses this incredible cathedral called the Sagrada Familia. Every part of Barcelona was built with a level of intentionality, but not just the kind of intentionality that you see or you would talk about in a modern urban planning department at a university, because the city has had a tendency to attract visionaries. Visionaries who were highly creative, who were willing to step outside the lines, but who did it constantly with this vision towards the future. And on your screen right here is the Sagrada Familia. It is one of the largest, tallest cathedrals in the world. And it is the brainchild of an architect named Antoni Gaudí. And Gaudí is famous within Barcelona. Barcelona is famous for his architecture, and he took his inspiration not necessarily from what people had done before. He took his inspiration from nature itself. And in 1886, he was handed the opportunity to continue to build this cathedral. It had been started. And the plans that he was handed looked kind of like the plans for every other cathedral you could possibly imagine in Europe. And once he had signed on the dotted line, and once he said, yes, I'd be very honored to take this over, he went, oh, and by the way, now that the contract is mine, we're going to just pivot over here a little bit, and it's going to become whimsical, and it's going to become in the vision of nature, and it's going to include curved lines and huge columns that make you feel like you are standing in a forest. It is nothing like you've ever seen before. Gaudí worked on the Sagrada Familia until his death in 1926. If anyone wants to check the date, of which I've already confirmed I am not certain of, the Sagrada Familia is still not finished. The hope is that they will finish it this year, at the 100-year anniversary of his death. It has been handed off to architect after architect who have continued to build in alignment with his vision, in alignment with his legacy. And this fits so beautifully as a metaphor for what we are going to talk about over the course of the next 2 days. We're going to talk about transitioning from a model of care where we are just selling our time to where we are building out intellectual property of which we are simply curators in this professional lifetime, where IP will be handed off to the next generation of practitioners who can advance our work together. We are going to build off of our respective valuing of the healing power of nature to build something forward-looking. This is not about you either believe this or you believe that. This is about building off of these ideas into the future. So it is a beautifully metaphoric city to be able to speak to some of the elements that we're going to be talking about today. So before we talk about those pieces, before we get into the nuance and the strategy, let's talk about the state of the industry. And we're going to look at a few different areas. We are going to look at the economy. We're going to get into wellness trends. We're going to talk about care models, what's working and what's not, because some of the things we've talked about in the past are actually not seeing the uptake that we have seen historically. We're going to talk about marketing, we're going to talk about leadership, and we're going to talk about AI in practice. Let's jump in. So let's first discuss the economy, because this is a really important factor. When we're starting to look at who our ideal clients are, we need to understand this piece. So globally, I don't think anyone is going to be surprised to hear that we are experiencing some element of global volatility. US numbers and growth numbers, this is really interesting, do not actually reflect what we are seeing as a whole. Canada and the UK are remaining vulnerable. in terms of their economic numbers. And the reason that I say the US is not quite as strong as maybe is being projected is because we are actually seeing lead indicators of some elements of economic decline. And by lead indicators, what we are actually seeing are spending habits starting to shift with respect to US consumers. An example of the types of things that we are seeing, we're seeing an increase of groceries, for example, and purchasing of items such as hamburger helper. There are certain grocery purchases that actually indicate shifts of the economy. We're seeing increased numbers, like off the normal track, of how many people are depositing dogs and animals at shelters. So some of these main street markers are indicating that certainly at lower socioeconomic levels, we're starting to experience some real shifts. It's important to understand that in the context of the US market, most of the big numbers and oh my gosh, the economy is growing is a function of stock market prices, in particular driven by indexes such as the NASDAQ. And the NASDAQ itself is really driven by 10 big companies, of which we will return to when we start to talk about marketing and we start to talk about AI. So just like blood work, when we start to dig into the numbers, there's actually a little bit more going on here. The good news in all of this is that the health and wellness industry and sector remains relatively isolated from any markers of decline. So we're currently seeing the 7.3% compounded annual growth rate, meaning it's growing and it's compounding on an annual basis through 2028. So we're seeing an uneven concentration of growth, but we are still seeing strong sector resilience in health and wellness. This is actually really great news for us. But when we dig into the numbers, so now we've moved off the CBC and now we've like ordered all the tests. Let's get into this in a little bit more of a nuanced area, because this matters. This matters in how you run your practice. This matters when you're like, I want to help everybody. We are going to have to look at how we do that. So what we are seeing is uneven demand. So where we are seeing growth is in those household incomes in the US. We're seeing it above 75K household income, Canada 80, UK 40,000 pounds a year. And oh, my hair is getting in the way of the mic again. When you guys find it annoying, you can throw that in the chat. You can just say hair and I'll swish it out of the way. So what we're seeing in families above this level is increased demand. Below this level, we're seeing a really interesting purchasing dynamic when it comes to health and wellness. So below these income thresholds, what we are seeing is that while people are still purchasing in this sector, they're purchasing things in a one-off nature. They will buy one appointment with the chiropractor and hope that that helps, but they will not come back for a second. They will buy one supplement, but they will not buy all of the supplements. And probably when those supplements run out, they are not necessarily buying more. So this is really important to understand when we're starting to look at the demographic to whom we are marketing and to whom we are creating programming. One of the things I talk about a lot is we help more people not by lowering our price, but by innovating our offering. And the current economic climate requires a level of innovation that we have not necessarily seen before. So what does this actually mean for me? And for each of these sections, I'm going to try to summarize this in terms of what it means. It means that you must build primary offers that are going to align with a demographic that is actually interested in them. What we are also seeing in terms of those demographics and higher household incomes is that they are not looking for one-off transactional care. What they are actually looking for is transformational change. We'll get into how to deploy that and why that's so important. What we're also seeing is the time for money model of care costs more to deliver than it does to receive in return. Anybody who's still like selling their time to their patients, this is what it costs for a 45-minute appointment. This is what it costs for a 30-minute appointment. People are not interested in purchasing your time the way we could get away with in the past. We'll talk about how to model that out. I would hope that at this point, most of you, your deep desire is that I'm moving away from that. How many of you, just say yes, would like to stop trading your time for money? Just say yes if that is an interest of yours. Okay, you're like, yes, please. Yes, yes. I don't know about you, my time is my most valuable asset, which is why I'm just so grateful that you are all here. I don't want to sell my time. I want to sell my strategy. We're going to talk about how to make that happen. Let's get into wellness trends. So this should not be a surprise to anybody in the room, but who knew metabolic medicine is actually having a moment? This also should not be a surprise to you. Obesity rates are at an epidemic level. here is something that's really interesting. Anti-obesity drugs are projected to hit $95 billion by 2030. These are not going away. There's massive opportunity here, not just in terms of leveraging GLP-1s, but the adjacent micro communities that we see alongside that. So 12% of Americans are reporting GLP-1 use. What's really interesting is that we are seeing 20% of women between the ages of 50 and 64 who are leveraging GLP-1s. These numbers are wild. We're also starting to see really strong use of GLP-1s for comorbidities. And as more and more money goes into this, we know how pharmaceutical companies work. They are going to want to find as many uses as possible for this. So we're going to see big shifts. We're seeing growth in terms of peptide therapeutics as a whole. If this is not currently part of your scope, but you do sit on the board of one of the regulators, this is an area where it would be very beneficial for you to push for scope expansion. So we're going to see a lot more peptide therapeutics sitting on the market. And we're seeing a very strong aesthetic spillover from the demand for GLP-1. So there's a lot of opportunities here. So having programming that works adjacent to GLP-1s is kind of a no-brainer. I'm not suggesting that you all go and shift your niches or your niches or your arena of authority, whatever terminology you want to use. I'm just sharing where opportunities are sitting currently. There is going to be real opportunity in terms of continuity of care. What happens to these patients once they go on these medications? How are we managing muscle health? All of the things that I know so many of you are already doing, it is going to become more expansive. And there's a lot of opportunity that's going to be sitting within the realm of comorbidities. So just mark it down. It may be a factor for you. One big thing that I just want you to take away from this wellness trend is that you probably don't want to ignore it. You're going to want to include it in your messaging. So even if it's not something you're using in your practice, it's going to be something that you want to be aware of in your narrative, in your newsletter, in your acknowledgement of your clients feeling seen. Aesthetic medicine. So here we're seeing an 8 to 9% compounded annual growth rate. I just came back from London. I was speaking at an integrative aesthetics conference. The interest that the aesthetic industry has in functional medicine and naturopathic medicine is massive. Conversely, what we're seeing are lots of people looking to functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, anyone in our realm, you guys in this room, for solutions regarding natural aging. 70% of consumers are considering some form of cosmetic procedure. Their motivation for this is not to look overdone. Their motivation is confidence, looking refreshed. So these are really important considerations, things to just be aware of. It is a growing area, and it's not going to go anywhere as we start to look at the demographic numbers and we start to look at the aging numbers across the Western world. So what does this mean for me? There are opportunities, especially if you're running a multidisciplinary clinic. If you are focusing on perimenopausal health or women in that age bracket, they also happen to be the largest spenders of health and wellness, and they are looking for these solutions. So if it's a solution and you have a program in your office that can attend to these needs, you're going to do well with that piece. Now, before we talk about any other wellness ideas and trends, I want to be really clear. I'm not sharing this so that you're pivoting around and you're adding all of these pieces. This is an awareness piece of it. Fits into where you're already working. Perfect. We're going to amplify from there. What does this mean for me? And I just spoke to this idea. This is not going to be just about incorporating procedures, especially on the aesthetic side. Again, back to the numbers that are tracking around this idea of transformation. People are really looking for a strong, long-term solution, a transformational solution. So speaking in the context of that language, looking at how you can plug into procedures, we're going to talk about how to create a transformational ecosystem over the course of our conversation this morning. It's going to factor in a really important way. Now, this I found particularly interesting, this idea of digital mental health. And there's some extrapolations here that I really want you to take. So here's what I found really interesting. Not only are the numbers massive here, so demand and budgets have shifted online. Mental health visit volume rose 39% and spending rose 53% from 2019 to 2022, straight through the era of COVID. What this enabled us to be able to do was to start to look at whether or not delivering mental health care online actually had any negative consequences in terms of outcomes for patients. I am not talking about severe mental health conditions. I'm talking about cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety or for depression or like that general genre of condition and a need. And what the meta-analyses are showing is that we're not seeing any discernible negative outcome associated with it. The outcomes are just as good when we deliver care online as when we deliver them in person. And recognizing that we are sitting within an epidemic of mental health concerns, this is really positive news because it means the cost of care delivery has dropped significantly. Here's the extrapolation that I want you to be aware of. If you deliver a system of medicine that does not require that patients are in the room, I think we're going to start to see more and more opportunity online. As much as like sitting across from a screen is not necessarily what we all want to do, and I want to be clear that the strongest resistance to this idea actually comes from practitioners themselves, not consumers. There is going to be a strong economic argument to looking at how we deploy and deliver some elements of our care online. And as we get into care models and where we're seeing trends in that realm, what we're actually seeing is that hybrid clinic models are doing the best in terms of retention of patients. So again, something that I want you to be aware of, and I want you to be aware of the research and the evidence which suggests that patient care is not compromised in the process. Let's talk perimenopause. So the most reliable, and you're all sitting there like, when is she going to talk about menopause? It's all I see in my biased feeds on Instagram. The most reliable buyer of transformational wellness in 2025 are midlife women. I'm going to say this again. If you feel like this area is saturated, that's okay, because we're taking over the world. The most reliable buyer of transformational wellness in 2025 are midlife women, and they're looking for all of the things that I was speaking to beforehand. So the global menopausal market is $17 billion in 2024. It's expected to be $24 billion by 2030. Hormone replacement therapy, $16 billion industry in 2024, expected to grow to $27 billion by the time we get to 2032. And here's the coolest part. When we start to look at this actual demographic tide, by 2030, we will have 1.2 billion women in menopause or who are postmenopausal. And as I saw it, I looked at that stat and I was like, do you think maybe that's like the real cause of global warming? But more importantly, you have a massive consumer market of individuals who not only have the spending capacity, they have the desire for your services. So if you are feeling, and it is very biased, your own social media feeds, like everyone is talking about this, that's okay, because there are literally billions of women who are looking for your help and for your support. So here's what this means when we're talking about perimenopausal health. We need to find a sub-niche. Find the thing below the thing. So when we start to have, it used to be that we could be like, oh, my niche is women's health. And it used to be that my niche is menopause. It used to be that my niche is perimenopause. It used to be that I do hormones in perimenopause. I want you to know that there's an opportunity for your authority to get more specific. We can start to take that subject area expertise and plug it into some sub-markets. These are some pieces that I want you to be aware of. Let's translate some of that economic data. Who is actually purchasing transformational care? What are they looking for? Where do they hang out? So this is how I want you to start to cross-reference some of these trends and some of these pieces that we are seeing. Let's get into care models. So this I found really interesting. As we include patient portals for booking, patient portals for sharing information, patient portals where we deliver adjacent education to our patients. I'm not talking about an online course. I'm talking about educational material available online for your patients, which we're actually starting to see is fewer cancellations from those patients in terms of in-person care. This costs your clinic, this costs your practice a lot. Not only does it cost you financially, it costs you emotionally, because I know you hate having the conversation of charging your patients for missing their appointments. So we're going to talk about how we address this from a multifactorial perspective. But one of the things to keep in mind is that as you start to create a hybrid experience where I see a patient in my office, but I also give them access to assets online, we're seeing an increased stickiness in terms of how they interact with you. We also know that hybrid models of care are better for retention. You do not need to see your patients in your office all the time to justify paying rent. It's probably not convenient for most of your patients to see you in your office all the time. You also probably don't need a 30-minute appointment every 3 weeks in order to deliver care to your patients. So as we get more nuanced in designing the transformational program of their health, we're going to have different types of appointments. I would just like you to be open-minded about the fact that not all of it needs to be delivered in real life. So again, transformational care delivered through a system or methodology is something where we're seeing increased demand. This is important to note too. Higher income health and wellness purchasers are less interested in group programs than they are one-on-one. We're going to talk about where group programs fit into your ecosystem, but this idea of, I'm really tired of seeing patients, so I'm just going to start a group program, is going to require a little bit more nuance. Online courses in their traditional form, this stuff's really important. Online courses in their traditional form are rapidly becoming commoditized by AI. So again, this idea of, I'm really tired of seeing patients, I'm just going to build an online course. That's not going to work the way it was going to work 3 years ago. And if 3 years ago, you're like, I'm just going to think about this a little bit more, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to have an online course because I know I'll be tired, that ship has sailed. And this is one of the themes, this is one of the ideas, and this is one of the reasons why decisiveness is going to be an imperative leadership skill at this juncture, is because the world moves faster than it did before. Opportunities that were so clearly laid out 3 years ago do not exist in the same realm. And the pace at which the world is changing is happening really, really quickly. Now, if you're sitting there and you're like, I came to Impact Lives because I want to learn how to make online courses because I'm so tired of seeing my patients one-on-one, don't worry, we're going to talk about where that fits. We're going to talk about how we do that. We're going to talk about the milestones you need to hit inside your practice to open up options for yourself. So hang tight, but it's going to require a little bit more nuance around how we build that ecosystem of care. The world is changing, but health and wellness consumers are becoming more sophisticated at the same time. And this last point here around passive income, this is the most depressing slide in the entire 2 days, by the way. So if you live through this, know that like it's only uphill from here. Passive income from the online space is no longer a reasonable expectation at this juncture in the health and wellness space. We're going to talk about why that is. It does not mean that you will not have access to leveraged sources of income. But this idea, one, of passive income, which is a terminology that is way overused, and two, the way we've maybe traditionally thought about it in a fairly unsophisticated way, is going to have to get readdressed. Let's move on. That was the most depressing slide. It's only going up from here. So when we build out a methodology, when we create a transformational approach, what it means is we're starting to create a cornerstone. We're starting to create a strategy within our practice that will enable us to have leverage. It will enable us to grow. But we have to have a level of nuance to make it work. Now, there are some shifts that are happening with respect to how we package out our care. There are also some important shifts happening in terms of how we market our care. So let's talk about this. These are happening rapidly. Shifts in the last week around how Google is indexing information have come out. Remember how it used to, you'd look for something on Google and it would be like 1 through page 10, hundreds of options. If you go to Google now, there's 10 listings. Which means if you don't have a well-indexed website, you're not going to come up in the top 10 anymore. We talked about SEO like 10 years ago, and suddenly it's going to become top of mind to the conversation. So these things are not only shifting every 6 months, they're literally right now shifting every single week. Here's some important things to know. Social media and paid traffic strategies are the biggest tactical adjustments that are going to need to be addressed. There's good news here for some of you. There's bad news here for some of you, but let's just get into it. I don't think anybody is going to be surprised by this, but social reach is down. If it feels like I'm making really great content, I'm putting so much effort into my Instagram and nobody is seeing it, it's not just you. Is anyone feeling that? Is anyone else feeling? Just drop yes in the chat. I actually can't see the chat that well without my glasses on, but I can see when you're posting. Yeah, I feel like that too. I also feel like 85 gazillion people a day tell me that I deserve to have more exposure. It's like a whole other thing. But yes, you absolutely, social reach is down. So engagement has fallen by 36% on Facebook, and 16% on Instagram. Thumbs down to Meta right now. Meta health ads are constrained. What does this mean? If you are advertising your health and wellness program on Meta platforms, Instagram or Facebook, they are not proliferating. They are not sending your ads as widely as they could. It is much, much more difficult in terms of being seen from an ads and an ad spend on Meta right now, in particular in the health and wellness sector. LinkedIn, I do think, is a really nice place to hang out. But I just want to put one caveat here. This is a professional discovery platform. This is where we can put our professional face forward. We can position ourselves as an authority. One thing I don't love seeing in my Instagram are like the nitty-gritty details of perimenopause. People are sitting at work. They are interpreting and they are looking at this data a little bit different. We need to have nuance around how we show up on each of these platforms. But LinkedIn is a place that is overwhelmingly positive and is a very strong option for professionals. It's really important to see this piece too, and I'm hitting some highlights here. The importance of reviews. And I know some of you are already like, but Meghan, I'm in a jurisdiction, I'm not allowed to have reviews. One, that policy is literally under review at the current moment, but this is important to note, that reviews drive local choice. Only 4% of American consumers do not use online reviews to make a choice. That means 96% of American consumers are using online reviews. The number one place you can be acquiring online reviews right now is on Google and Google My Business. You can have a Google My Business, and we're going to talk about the importance of professional directories. Having a Google My Business account and giving your patients the opportunity to leave reviews, because you can't edit them, you can't do anything about it, is a critical piece to establishing your authority online. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into those details. I think this is a positive because we're not seeing the reach that we were seeing on social even a year ago. It means that you do not need to be posting there with the same level of frequency and intensity as you had been in the past, because it is not a high leverage use of your time. Now let's talk about it from a slightly different angle. Let's talk about this idea of personal brand. Here for sure is something you need to know. You have to be findable online. If you are not findable online through SEO, and having a strong presence, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to know that you exist. So trust will start with how you look online. You need a professional looking website. When they land on your page, they need to be like, oh, this looks like a professional site. We're going to get into some of those details and some nuance around that as we move through the course of the next few days. And when we don't position ourselves from an expert perspective in the realm of professional service delivery that we call YMYL, your money, your life. So people who are delivering healthcare, people who are delivering financial advice, they have an increased scrutiny from these big platforms, Google, Meta, etc. And so if the way you show up online does not convey or confer a level of professionalism and authority, your searchability, your findability online, rather, is going to be reduced. So we might have been able to get away with having like a crummy looking website a few years ago. At least they could kind of find me if they put my name in. Now you will literally be suppressed by these larger platforms. One of the fastest things that you could do in this moment, I want you to put it on your like Monday morning to-do list, or you could put it on your Thursday afternoon to-do list, is to actually complete your Google business profile. So this is a really important factor for you in terms of increasing your searchability and your professional positioning online. So a few things, and we'll talk about this over the course of the next few days, is making sure you're findable because you have a strong SEO capacity on your site. Hang tight. If you're like, SEO, I don't want to talk about that. It's like something my brother-in-law used to help me with. We're going to get into how we can increase the SEO and your SEO presence online. Keep your primary social media feeds up to date. It doesn't mean you have to post every day, but at least be consistent and at least be on brand. And make it a priority to put people on your mailing list. And we're going to get into these numbers. We're going to start to talk about the importance of these different elements of your marketing and where your conversions are actually coming from. But how you nurture people and having the ability to nurture and email people is an imperative part of your marketing strategy. And lastly, I know this feels old school, but you need to have 5 to 8 complementary businesses with whom you network, with whom you don't have overlapping services, you have complementary services. And you need to take those people out to lunch in real life. A huge part of marketing is reputational, and that means building out those relationships and those referral networks. So what does this overwhelmingly mean? It means taking ownership of your personal brand in real life and online. Leadership. I alluded to this at the beginning, but I want to swing back to it. And this is going to come up time and time again over the course of the next few days. But with the world moving at the pace that it is moving, being able to manage AI is not just about subscribing to an AI newsletter. Being able to manage your marketing or the growth of your business is not just about knowing the latest tactics. All of it is actually going to come down to this piece. And there are lots of leadership skills that we can focus on, but I want to really dig into the ones that are most imperative at this juncture in time. The first one at the top is adaptability. But what I really mean here is actually being okay with a lack of certainty. And we've been in training for this for a really long time. COVID kicked off the school of uncertainty training for all of us in life and in business. And now we are really seeing a need to pull from those skills. I wrote something down in a talk the other day, and just as I tend to scribble and doodle when I'm listening to other people speak, and I wrote down, certainty is not coming to save you. If you are one of those people that you're like, once I have more information and I'm a little bit more certain I can make a decision, we talked about that at the beginning, I want you to know that I certainly do not foresee a landscape of certainty happening again within your lifetime. Certainty is not something you are going to be able to rely on. Being comfortable in a state of uncertainty is going to serve you well. It's going to mean you'll pull on skill number 2, which is decisiveness and accountability in the face of uncertainty. You are going to have to make the decisions. Not, I'm going to ask my partner, I'm going to talk to my dog, I'm going to just check in with my kids or call my dad. You have to start to make decisions in your business and in your life. And you have to be okay with being accountable for the outcome. Most of the time when there's resistance to making these decisions, it's not the decision itself. It's having to claim full ownership of the consequences of those decisions that is really hard. I feel that. I know that. How many people are feeling that? Just throw yes in the chat. If you're like, yeah, that hits. It's owning the consequences that are hard. Now, in an era with increased videos, in an era where we can upload our face to Sora and it can be used for a million other things, please don't do that, by the way. Authentic vulnerability is going to be imperative. It's why I went and acquired this virus just in time for Impact Live so I can cough all over you and have real life happening. But authentic vulnerability is going to be really important. People want to see that you're a real human. You've got real feelings and real things going on. It's how you're going to be relatable. And lastly, this idea of values congruence. Let me just flick my hair out of the way again. What do I mean by values congruence? I mean like having integrity, being really clear that this is something that I stand for and following through on that. We really have to step to the line in today's day and age. You want to stand out in a slippery world, you have to be really clear on who you are. And all of this to me strikes me as an opportunity. Let's get into the last few pieces. Let's build off this leadership idea. Let's talk about AI in practice. And you'll see we have some incredible sponsors and supporters here at Impact Lives, and I encourage you to check them out. Sponsors and supporters who will literally scribe your chart notes for you. Sponsors and supporters who will enable you to leverage your time more effectively. Back in the day when we all wanted passive income or a group program because we were tired of sitting across one-on-one from patients, like the bonus thing that they're sending us, the bone that we're being thrown is now there's all of these tools that make sitting across from patients way more efficient, One of the highest leverage skills you can acquire at this juncture in time is the ability to leverage and utilize AI. You want your time back? You want to go hang out with your kids? You don't need a passive income project over here. You need to learn how to leverage AI. So in terms of some key points here, 34% of US adults say they have used ChatGPT. The key part here is this has doubled since 2023. The average consumer is becoming quite conversant with this technology. They are expecting it to exist. That's good news for us. A 2024 global survey found 9 in 10 employees are using generative AI at work, and 21% are heavy users. We are not seeing data that says it's replacing jobs. What we are saying is we are finding data that it is making jobs easier to deploy. Now, just as a few key points here, before we step into the landscape of what we'll call the intelligent practice, I just want you to have a sense of some of the language and the vocabulary of AI. So just so you know, because we're going to talk about AI over the course of the next few days, and I want you to feel like, oh, you're like, I know what's going on. When we talk about apps, these are the tools. This is Perplexity, this is Claude, this is Gamma AI, this is ChatGPT. If you don't use any of these apps, don't worry, they'll probably be obsolete by next week. But these are the tools that you can download and you can acquire and you can use to leverage the power of AI. The models, you'll hear this, you'll hear about LLMs, large language models. This is the way of thinking, the programming way of thinking that is new and novel with respect to AI. The fact that I can talk to a technology and I don't have to know how to program is a monumental shift in terms of computer science. Tooling are some of the little tools that the computer brains themselves are using to be able to bring information to you, to help them continue to learn more. The cloud is where the information is being stored. And the actual computers and the actual chips are where this information is actually sitting in servers and fields, heating up faster than perimenopausal women. I share all of this in the context of current trends, not just so that you have the language, but I share this in the context of current trends because if you are watching stock markets, you know that companies that are involved in each of those different areas are currently skyrocketing. In fact, they're driving the main numbers of the economy. If we were to come full circle, which we have, AI is infiltrated on so many layers of how we are living our life today. It is not something that we can opt out of. It's something that we need to learn how to tame, how to leverage, and how to build our businesses from.